All right, well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Oregon City Business Alliance October Forum on Infrastructure and Water Resiliency, being sponsored by WES today. I'd like to thank all the members of WES. If you'd like to stand if you're here today from WES. I know, Shelley, you're here somewhere. There you go. Here we are. Thank you very much. I think you're going to find today's presentation very informative for a lot of different reasons. You know, obviously our weather has changed here over the last week from a severe drought throughout the entire western region to one of epic proportions of the river of water coming through central California. I saw where Sacramento and San Francisco had close to 5 inches of rain on Sunday. So it kind of gives you an idea of the extremes that we're dealing with when it comes to water resiliency. It's not just the severe droughts that you have to be concerned about, but sometimes when you have too much water, it can become a problem as well as the reservoirs and other areas overflow. But that's what we as a community and a region need to prepare for today, is those extremes. It's not something where you go, well, that will never happen again for another 100 years. No, I think what we've experienced now over the last 5 to 10 years throughout the West gives us a lot of data to support the fact that these climate changes are here to stay. And what can we do today as a government, as a group of businesses to prepare for that so that we can continue to flourish, continue to thrive, continue to function as a productive society, not only in agricultural, commercial, recreational, but just our daily lives. So today we're going to have a panel presentation that's going to be talking about that. But before getting started, we have Public Works Director John Lewis with us here today to kind of give us a summary of 2 ballot measures that are going to be on the ballot, upcoming ballot. Somebody talking to me? Hello. Thank you very much. Dealing with some water rate increases that the citizens of Oregon City will be voting on. So John, if you'd like to come up and kind of share some information on that, we would certainly appreciate it. Yeah. Well, they've got a little, if you want to come over here by me, and then you'll be,
Can we get like this?
Yeah, we can. Oh, by the way, I had hip replacement surgery a little less than 2 weeks ago. So today was the first day I've driven my car since the surgery, and I wasn't sure I was going to get here without hitting anybody or anything. So if you see me walk a little odd or dance, I'm happy to say the surgery went well, and I'm on my road to recovery. So that being said, here you go, John.
Thank you, Kent. Everybody hear me okay? All right, that's great, thanks. Well, yeah, I'm here today to talk about water, but I'm also here to talk about a couple other things. On your table, we've got our special trail news article, which talks about water. There's also a pamphlet on your table that talks about the last mile shuttle service. So we've got more of these. If you're an employer and you want to have more of those in your informational section of brochures, let us know. We can get you some more of those. But that shuttle service is new to Oregon City. And there's another shuttle in Clackamas County as well, but it's new to Oregon City. I don't know the schedule as well as I should probably, but they're trying to do more of a cross the TriMet route, but not follow the TriMet route. So keep that in mind. But thank you for having me, and thank you for giving me just a few minutes to talk about this water ballot, or these 2 water ballots. The city's got 2. So this Oregon City Commission made a decision to put 2 ballot measures on the November election. So if you live in Oregon City, how many people live in Oregon City and will be voting on this? Just a show of hands. So pretty good group, not everybody. So that's good to know. But so we've got 2, ballot measure 576 and 578. The 576 is really about lending and allowing the city to borrow funds. So our city charter is a little bit unique in that in order to borrow funding or borrow money for any kind of funding, whether it be water or any other initiative, the voters have to approve that. So any indebtedness is a voter-approved initiative. So we're asking the voters to allow the city to have the authority to borrow up to $38 million. That's the first one. And that $38 million is intended for water capital. The other initiative, the 578, is related to water rates. So another uniqueness about Oregon City is that we have rate limitation. We've had this for several years in our charter that limits us to 3% rate increases, water rate increases in the city. And in order to exceed that, we need a vote of the people. So again, both those issues we're asking for some help. So the other thing I wanted to say, and I'm just seeing Shelley in the front audience here, I'm the Public Works Director, I'm staff. I really am very limited in what I can say about the measure. It's really something that our commission, it'd be great if they were here. I know none of them could really make it today, but I can't really advocate for this measure. And so I'm really going to give you mostly factual information. That was my intention. But I thought I'd have a little bit of fun with it. So, you know, you yell at me or throw something at me if I miss you. And we're also about to move into our public works facility up on First Street. So I'm cleaning my office, or I'm supposed to be cleaning my office. I found a couple of giveaways, but I thought I'd ask you a couple questions and see what kind of buffs we have in the room and what you might know. So, and I'm looking at Jerry. Jerry, you're disqualified. You can't answer this question. So, Oregon City is the oldest city west of the... Wrong. That's wrong. West of the... There you go. Very good. So it's the Rocky Mountains. That mistake happens all the time. So there we go. I've got you a little giveaway. Just want to make sure folks remember that, because a lot of our documentation talks about west of the Rocky Mountains. We've made the mistake of the Mississippi, but I actually looked it up, and there's another city that's oldest. And we're the oldest incorporated city. So Astoria and us have a little bit of a debate over who's the oldest. They were founded earlier than us, but we were incorporated sooner than them. So there you go. And then another question, so another giveaway. Aside from drinking shower water, flushing, and otherwise washing waste down to our WES partners at the treatment plant, what's our domestic system most useful for? Not stormwater. No. I thought I heard something in the background. Fire protection. It's funny, Dan, that you answered that, given the fire alarm that we just heard. But I've got another giveaway for Dan here too, so I'll give you that. Let's see. I've got to figure out how to move this to the next slide because I'm going to run out of time. Maybe. Oh, I forgot to turn it on. Sorry. So yeah, Oregon City is an old location. We've got a lot of old things in Oregon City, including our water system. So the age thing is pretty predominantly known. If you've listened to any speakers on the topic of utilities in Oregon City, we've got a lot of old pipelines. I don't know if you read the pamphlet, but if you did, I really got a kick out of Commissioner Adam Morrill's article suggesting that we've got pipes as old as Amelia Earhart when she took her first flying lesson. So we've got some old facilities, old utilities. We've also got some facilities that were built when we didn't have things like earthquake standards, or definitely not the earthquake standards that we have today. So we just like to remind folks that these infrastructure systems have really high needs, and they tend to cost a lot of money to fix. So anybody in the room, this is another giveaway, know how many reservoirs Oregon City has? I was going to ask you how many millions of gallons of storage, but I doubt nobody will know that. But how many reservoirs do we have in Oregon City? Anybody know? 4 is close. We've actually got 4 locations. So Dan, you're going to win that one again. So Dan was the mayor, though. He remembers these things. We've got 4 locations. We've got 5 reservoirs, though, but 2 of them are located on the same site. So there you go. And we've got about 18 million gallons of reservoir storage. We did rebuild 1 reservoir not too many years ago, but really we haven't added a lot of reservoir capacity in many, many years. So that's another need for that would help, that these funds would help fund. So our master plan, we've done a lot of master planning of our water system. It calls for a lot of improvements, and that's, if you're interested in knowing what that is, there's information on our website at the, oh, Patty, help me out here, OregonCityWater.org. Yeah, OregonCityWater.org, and that is in the information that's on the table. Just keep in mind, the City Commission's already made decisions on increasing developer fees, so that's 1/2 of the equation. It's actually a little more than half. It's 63% of the equation. So the development community is expected to pay for 63% of that 81 million. The rate increase pays for the balance of that, and I think that's important for folks to know. So we're not going to go too deep into this, but basically the ballot measure, there's been some confusion about what we're really asking for as it comes to rates. If you remember, we're limited to 3% by our charter, and we have been implementing that over the last several years. The commissions have been good about not kicking the can and increasing rates 3% every year to keep up with inflation. This measure asks for something above that 3%, up to 6%. So, but now it's not a measure that actually raises the rates. The City Commission still needs to make those decisions, or that decision, and they'll make that regularly every year. But this ballot measure for rates gives us the flexibility to be able to make that decision and make it in a way that would help fund if the ballot measure for indebtedness is approved, we would have a way to pay for that. If the ballot measure for indebtedness is approved but not the rates, then we're not really sure how much or if at all we could borrow any funding, because the rates wouldn't be there to support the payments. So really both those initiatives are important for the city, and we're trying to share that information with you in a way. This slide just kind of represents, a lot of people have seen the 6% and really kind of focused on that. We're hoping we don't need a full 6% rate increase. We're looking for, and really our analysis shows if we can get the right, if we can borrow the right amount of funding for the right interest rates, we could probably raise rates not much more than 1% or 2%. This rate shows a model of 4% over 6 years. So that's, the 6 years is another oddity about it, in that we're suggesting this is a short-term ask. So we're asking, again, the community to approve a rate increase over our existing 3%, up to 6% for 6 years, and 6 years in a row. And then we, according to our model, we could level off at the 3%. So with that, I'm probably out of time. And so happy to answer any questions if I can do that. But again, Kent, you ready?
All right, thank you, John. Appreciate it. And John did mention that if anybody has any questions, he'll be available to go ahead and respond to those. I did want to share with everyone that on your tables are blue cards, and those are our question cards. So after our PowerPoint presentation from the panel, we'll be opening it up for Q&A from the audience. So if you have a question, go ahead and fill it out. And when we get to that time slot of the program, just raise your hand, and Sherry Imes back there, wave your arm, Sherry. She'll come around and pick up your question card. So please feel free to get those filled out. So now we're going to go ahead and get into the main program today, and we have Renee Harbour, who's the Executive Director at the Environmental Learning Center. That's going to be coming up and introducing all the panelists for today's discussion. So here you go, Renee.
Good morning, everybody. There we go. Is it still morning? All right, give me just a sec to get myself set up here. There we go. Okay, well, again, good morning and welcome to today's discussion about the Clackamas River, a river that, whether people realize it or not, is so vital to all of our well-beings. I'd like to start by thanking our hosts, the Oregon City Business Alliance, for having the foresight to bring this topic in front of the business community. And also thanks to Clackamas Water Environment Services for sponsoring today's program. A big shout out specifically to Shelley Perini and Gail Shalom for organizing what I think will prove to be a very enlightening and thought-provoking discussion. Today you'll be hearing from three panelists whose work is all focused in different ways on the long-term health of the Clackamas River watershed. But before we get into hearing from our panel of experts, I'd like to provide an overview of the Clackamas River water basin and why it's important that we have this conversation. So the Clackamas River starts in the Cascade Mountains east of Salem. And it runs about 83 miles down to where it connects with the Willamette River, down where we're sitting today. The entire watershed that's mapped out here is about 940 square miles, and that land all drains either directly or through the various tributaries into the Clackamas River. The watershed is mostly forested in the upper reaches, and then starting around Estacada, it becomes more agricultural and urbanized. The watershed historically was covered in coniferous forest and was full of salmon, steelhead, bear, huckleberries, etc. Native Americans were attracted to that wealth of resources and hunted and fished here as early as 10,000 years ago, and then permanent settlements are known to have existed as early as 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. In fact, the headquarters of the Clackamas tribe was located not too far from where we're sitting today. European settlers discovered the Clackamas by the early 1800s and soon after began harvesting timber from the mouth of the river up to about where Estacada stands today, sometimes floating logs down the river to the processing plants. And of course, there needed to be somewhere to process the logs, so industry followed close behind. In fact, there was Buck's sawmill over in Gladstone that started processing paper around 1867. Farmers also discovered the fertile soil here and started clearing and cultivating the land by the mid-1800s. They grew delicious berries, grains, and vegetables, and grew enough to sell some to the Portland wholesale market. As time marched on and more people arrived, built homes and businesses, and discovered the wild scenic beauty of the watershed, we extracted more and more benefits from the river. And these benefits are wide-ranging, from recreation to spiritual. I think especially the last couple of years, a lot of people have relied on forest for stress relief. Power generation. Portland General Electric has 5 hydroelectric dams along the river, and they generate enough clean energy to power 78,000 homes. From an environmental perspective, about half or more than half of the Clackamas River has been designated as a national wild and scenic river. And that's because it's noted for its anadromous fish habitat. It supports coho salmon and spring and fall chinook, as well as summer and winter steelhead. It's also ideal habitat for species like bald eagle and the northern spotted owl, as well as a number of other bird and mammal species. More than 300,000 people get their drinking water from the Clackamas River. There are 5 treatment plants that extract water from the river, and that those areas that get their water from Clackamas are Estacada, Gladstone, Lake Oswego, Oregon City, Tigard, Westland, as well as unincorporated areas of Clackamas County and the Happy Valley, Damascus area, so a wide-ranging area. Of course, as John Lewis just mentioned, we use water from our taps for a number of different reasons, not just drinking water. So imagine if you didn't have access to clean water to wash your hands 20 times a day, like you've been doing recently, or for fire suppression, as well as irrigating your lawn, your vegetable garden, or for agricultural producers who are out there in the Clackamas area. And then, of course, the economic benefits beyond agricultural production. And I'm sure in this audience, everybody understands how important it is to have access to water, regardless what your business is. So yes, the river is important. But some of you might be asking, so what? Well, here's the so what. Portland State University recently completed a study on the resiliency of the Clackamas watershed in the face of climate change. And it predicts that in addition to the rising temperatures, the total amount of precipitation, while remaining about the same, will come more as rainfall and less as snow. This would result in less snowpack in the mountains, and since the river is fed by snowmelt during the summer months, that means that there would be less water in the river during the summer when demand is at its highest. So with climate change pressing upon us, we have to ask ourselves, will the river be able to continue doing what we need it to be? Are we at risk? And if so, what's being done about it? So now let's turn to our panelists to find out if our wonderful river can withstand the heat. So I invite the panelists to come on up to the table. And while they're doing that, I'd like to introduce you to Kim Swan, who's not able to be with us today. She's the water resource manager from Clackamas River Water Providers. So I wanted to share a little bit about who they are because they're important to this conversation as well. The Clackamas River Water Providers is a coalition of the municipal water providers that get their drinking water from the Clackamas River. Members come from 9 different cities and water districts, ranging from Tigard to Happy Valley, and including the North Clackamas County Water Commission, which serves Gladstone, and the South Fork Water Board, which serves Oregon City and West Linn. Their purpose is to fund and coordinate efforts to preserve the Clackamas River as a high-quality drinking water source, thereby minimizing future drinking water treatment costs, while at the same time being good stewards of the river. Their work includes public outreach and education on watershed issues, drinking water, and water conservation. And there's some materials on your table as well as at the table out front, so you can learn more about them. Next, I'd like to turn it over to our panelists. I'd like to each of them to introduce themselves, starting with Cheryl McGinnis.
Is it on? Okay, so it is on. Yes, I can tell. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of this panel as well as join you in the discussion on this important topic. I am Cheryl McGinnis, Executive Director of the Clackamas River Basin Council, and we are a nonprofit incorporated in the state of Oregon, given authority by the Board of County Commissioners 25 years ago this year, with a focus on watershed health. And our activities involve working with communities to improve community waterways, and to conduct projects that will help improve and protect water quality, provide habitat for fish, and overall, primarily that, restoring fish populations. We are a watershed council in the state of Oregon, and the Oregon plan was developed and included the formation of watershed councils to help implement the Oregon plan to restore fish populations. The Oregon plan is designed for us to work with our local communities, engage community members in our efforts, and to then restore native fish populations, endangered fish populations, and aquatic processes, while also then bringing benefits of environmental, cultural, and economic to the local areas. Our council is especially successful in the basin by working with partners for clean water and to improve aquatic and wildlife habitat and the quality of life for all of us. We have, as Renee mentioned, wild genetic legacy fish species, which are wild coho, spring and fall chinook, steelhead, bull trout, Pacific lamprey. There are discussions of reintroducing chum, and then there are resident fish species. The Clackamas River is a gem. It is a microcosm of what Oregon offers, that being opportunities for agriculture, industry, commerce, recreation, and we have the urban and rural lifestyles as well. So that's who we are.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I'll pass it on to Susan.
I think we'll skip to me, right? Well, hello, and thank you all for inviting us here today and having me here. I'm Ron Waringa. I'm the Environmental Services Manager for Clackamas Water Environment Services. And by way of introduction to Water Environment Services West, as we call it, we are a clean water utility. We provide regional wastewater and stormwater services to several municipalities in the urbanized area of Clackamas County. We protect public health and the environment, not only for the communities that we serve, but also communities along our waterways where, like the Willamette River. Our services vary geographically, which is important to know, and in Oregon City specifically, we primarily provide wastewater treatment and pollution prevention services for the wastewater system. We are not the surface water provider to homes and businesses in Oregon City. That's what John and his team does. So you may wonder why I'm here talking to you. West is responsible for wastewater and stormwater infrastructure in the urbanized portion of the Clackamas River watershed, including the areas north of the Clackamas River and in Happy Valley. So our work certainly does directly affect water quality in the Clackamas, and that's what I'm here to talk to you today about, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. And again, thanks for having us here.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Susan Schlangen. I'm a professional engineer with Water Systems Consulting, based here in our Portland office. We're a full-service civil engineering consulting firm focused on creating a better water future through water resources planning, infrastructure design, all manners of utility engineering support, and strategic communications. We were founded on a vision of clean water through innovation, but most importantly, collaboration and partnership through listening to understand, nurturing trust, delivering value to our clients, and leaving everything we touch better. We provide these services to Clackamas Water Environment Services, Clackamas River water providers and their member agencies, as well as utilities throughout the state of Oregon and California. I'm proud to sit on the Board of Trustees for the Water Reuse Association, Pacific Northwest Section, as well as a member of Oregon Aqua and the Pacific Northwest Clean Water Association, particularly involved with the Government Affairs Committee. So to be brief, I'm very passionate about forging this clean water future with you all at the nexus of technology, public policy, and education. So thank you for allowing me to be part of this vital discussion.
Okay, thank you, panelists. You ready to get started with the questions? First question is, from your agency's perspective, what are the current issues impacting the Clackamas River watershed as a result of climate challenges and past wildfires? And we'll start with Cheryl again.
Thank you, Renee. I'm going to reiterate a couple things that Renee mentioned and perhaps elaborate just a little bit. The Clackamas River Basin Council is concerned about the issues that present impacts from climate change and the wildfires that compromise our water quality, water quantity, and fish habitat. And so starting off, the water quantity that is accumulated with snowmelt that Renee had, snowpack that Renee had mentioned, water quantity accumulated by snowpack with timely snowmelt during spring and summer seasons is threatened with warmer winter temperatures. Adequate snowpack then releases the right amount of water, as we've seen in our past, for our spring-fed streams and the Clackamas River flows. It's needed for our fish habitat as well as water quality. The water quantity is important during the summer seasons for both water quality and fish habitat. Heavier rains in the winter from the warming winter temperatures also increase the potential of flood conditions, which we've seen on occasion. Flood conditions generate erosion and turbidity in streams that also then compromise the habitat for fish. The wildfires have decimated stream bank vegetation. Our stream bank trees and shrubs provide stabilization of the stream banks, filter toxins from groundwater before it enters the water, and improves the conditions for both our drinking water source and fish habitat.
And yeah, I certainly appreciate this question, Renee, just sort of about the urgency of the issue, and I think my response will sort of focus on a couple of things. One, resiliency, which we've heard about today, and also infrastructure, which I'm really glad John was here today to talk about the importance of infrastructure. But yeah, there certainly is a sense of urgency when it comes to the Clackamas River, and particularly through the lens of climate change. I like to think about resiliency of the Clackamas this way. There are a lot of demands on the Clackamas River and its watershed. We really ask a lot of it. We ask it to drain the land for development. We ask it to supply water to our homes and businesses, provide habitat for imperiled salmon and steelhead, recreation opportunities, aesthetics, and so on. And there's really only so much capacity of the river to meet that demand, to meet all of those needs. There's push and pull, one can impact the other, and there's certainly not a ton of freeboard. A lot of the capacity of the river is used up. We are seeing significant changes in temperature and precipitation patterns in the watershed, that's for sure. Events are becoming more extreme, more frequent intense rainstorms, less snow, more heat, more wind, and ice, and that was just last year. You couple that with fires and floods and landslides that may result from some of these things that we're seeing, and even if in the short term, those really test the river's ability to meet all of the demands that we put on it. And it's not so much that any one demand or one event is the issue. Collectively, there's a reduced resilience overall with the demands, and when you couple that with some of these events that we're seeing from a changing climate, things become a little less predictable and potentially a little less stable. And so from a utility perspective, that's really important for us to focus on infrastructure, that infrastructure lens from how a potentially changing climate might impact the river, and ensuring that what the community has built out there in the wastewater and stormwater systems that have been built are working in the way that they're intended. That's certainly the key, working the way they're intended in light of these potential changes. And so I'll note too that these systems are traditionally designed from a more historical perspective when it comes to climate, particularly storm infrastructure, where we use historic precipitation patterns in our design standards. And so when these patterns change, we need to be mindful about potential impacts on our infrastructure, and we are tracking that and trying to keep up to make sure that wastewater stays in pipes, that stormwater stays away from buildings, and we keep pollution out of our rivers. They have to perform with these changes and these weather patterns that we're seeing, and that's certainly the heart of the issue. That's the issue and the challenge, to say the least, from our perspective.
So again, it's really encouraging to be here with you all today and to be discussing these issues with a sense of urgency. Maybe some of you have seen recent articles targeted at folks under 40 stating that we can expect a lifetime of climate extremes. Well, that's me. I'm here because we all need to be part of these conversations on how we're going to prepare and protect our natural environment best we can under the circumstances. And this discussion is so timely because protecting the Clackamas River watershed is going to take a lot of collaboration. It's important we're having these conversations before our community gets to the point where we are needing to make really difficult decisions at times. Climate change will demand that we work together like never before. It can take many years to build relationships, foster good ideas, and figure out how to work together. So congratulations to you all for thinking ahead and joining us today. So in that spirit, I'd like to share a couple stories with you from communities outside our immediate region that are facing some difficulties and may have waited too long to have these essential conversations. So the first takes place in Southern Oregon in Klamath Basin. Providing access to water to the numerous stakeholders in this region has been a challenge for many, many years. I'm sure many of you know this. And this year, serious drought has launched a water resources struggle into a full-blown crisis. This year, one of the ponds at Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge sits empty. The water level was so low that it presented disease risks for migrating birds. So the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had to choose one pond to try to keep healthy to prevent widespread ecological problems. I'll come back. And maybe most prominently featured in the news, the main irrigation canal has been shut off from farmers. 1,200 farms have lost access to water that they rely on to support their businesses. And additionally, scarce water also needs to be kept in the waterways that support ecology of the region. Low water levels can lead to high temperatures, toxic algae growth, and high levels of bacteria that present fatal risks to endangered species. The grim reality is that a new water sharing agreement or federal dollars for disaster relief doesn't fix the water supply shortage. There just isn't enough water this year, and there probably won't be enough next year and for many years to come. So communities need to be thinking about the resiliency and diversity of their water supplies. Creative new ways to use water are needed. In Klamath, a couple of the domestic wastewater agencies are looking at water reuse as a new supply option. So for the uninitiated, water reuse or recycled water is treated wastewater that is even further treated to be safe for things like crop irrigation. But state rules can make permitting difficult, and there hasn't been enough time spent on educating the public in the Klamath region to secure strong support for some of these important projects. An alternative water supply like recycled water can take years to develop, so we can't just wait until the moment it's needed most. I will forge on ahead despite my map. So picture the large state of California. I'd like to tell you about a few of our clients in California. So many drinking water agencies in California rely on the State Water Project. The State Water Project is a system that moves water all over California, from rivers in Northern California to heavily populated areas all across the state, large farms of Central California, and dry climates of Southern California. By the numbers, The State Water Project includes over 21 dams and over 700 miles of canals and pipelines. It provides water to 27 million people in the state and irrigates over 750,000 acres of farmland. Many drinking water agencies serving these 27 million people have become dependent on the State Water Project since its initiation in around 1960. Urban populations and farming industries were able to grow due to this water supply, but prolonged drought over the past decade meant that less State Water Project water is available to go around. So the local communities have had to use much more of their local supplies, and in some cases, drawing down their groundwater to low levels that can cause the ground to actually sink, and wells to become contaminated by saltwater. Many communities will not be able to survive by following this status quo. This is the case for several of our clients in California who are determined to create new ways to preserve and enhance local water supply. Our clients in Inland Empire and the San Bernardino Valley are making new agreements to use recycled water to recharge their groundwater basins, pumping clean, purified water back into the ground that can be used in the future. This will require construction of new treatment facilities, pipelines, and wells, which will require large investments. It also requires all of the agencies, 15 alone in Inland Empire, to agree how this water will be used. The projects require permitting and regulatory approval. So as you can imagine, this takes time, which is not on their side. Just this year, the State Water Project provided only 5% of the water that was asked for, and next year it may be 0. So the takeaway here is that drought-impacted communities can come together to achieve amazing solutions. We have technology on our side, we're very innovative, but it's not going to happen overnight. Starting these conversations, forging the relationships, making the agreements before the issue presents itself immediately is where you want to be.
Thank you, Susan. I apologize for the slides. She's got some beautiful slides prepared, as do our other presenters. Before we move to the next question, I just wanted to share a little bit from Kim Swan, who I mentioned from Clackamas River Water Providers, who's not able to be here. This is her response to that question. Most of the year, there's plenty of water in the Clackamas River. However, longer, hotter summers with little or no rain, such as what we saw in 2015 when we had virtually no snowpack, and in 2021, just this last summer, when we had very little summer rain, it resulted in really low river levels because people used more water than usual for longer periods of time with little rain to supplement the river flows. So low stream flows during the summer months may make it more challenging for us as water providers in meeting future regulations for fish flow targets. This could result in future water use restrictions such as limited outdoor water use. We anticipate summers like 2015 and 2021 to become more frequent. Okay, next question for our panelist. We've heard loud and clear that there are some serious issues facing the Clackamas watershed, but the good news is that folks here are doing some really good work to protect it. So I'd like to ask each of you to share what you're doing to mitigate these issues and to reduce harmful impacts to the Clackamas River. Starting with Cheryl again.
Thank you. The Clackamas River Basin Council relies on natural processes and serve to help buffer the impacts of climate change, warming temperatures, wildfires, by ameliorating what might be lost, what the challenges that we face. So those challenges being water quality degradation, reduction in water quantity, and the changes in temperatures throughout the year that impact both our source drinking water and habitat for fish. So our activities with you all, and I bet many of you have been involved with our activities or Greater Oregon City Watershed Council or Johnson Creek Watershed Council or North Clackamas Watersheds Council in activities like replant the riverside. This past year after the wildfires, we had generous community support as we led a campaign to replant the riverside $10 to plant 1 tree. We received such generous support and then planted approximately along 1 mile of stream, which was all along the north and south sides of the Clackamas around Eagle Creek and further upstream in the vicinity of Estacada, where wildfires, the Dowdy Road fire as well as Riverside fire impacted, decimated households. Wonderful to see the community support for other members of the community. Similarly, in a planting program, we have our Shade Our Streams program that was funded by PGE. We planted 30 miles along the Clackamas River and its tributaries over the course of 6 years. That's 5 miles each year, multiple trees, 300,000 plus. And we continue to keep that program running with continued support from PGE and Water Environment Services and others. So tree planting is effective in buffering the impacts, as I was commenting earlier about the degradation of water quality, stream bank erosion, the root systems of our trees and shrubs, native trees and shrubs, help to filter groundwater before it hits the stream as well as stabilize the banks. And then our other activities that are in-stream based, again, encouraging natural processes to be restored and returned to normal functioning, include side channel reconnections, floodplain reconnection, wetland increases. These systems will absorb the velocity, the high velocity of winter flows as it come whistling down the river in our streams that I commented previously about the erosion that occurs, degrading water quality. Our side channels, floodplains, and wetlands can absorb, serve as storage. We heard about 5 reservoirs for Oregon City. The streams and tributaries also with these natural systems in place can help add to the storage capacity, where then we need that water quantity later in the year. The Clackamas River Basin Council also has a robust education, engagement of stakeholders, and stewardship activities. Examples of these activities are formed in order to get people involved, to encourage the love of this gem of the Clackamas River and the watershed, to then be encouraged and committed to help be watershed stewards as individuals as well as businesses and groups. So examples of what we do with education and the other activities include clean water celebration, Earth Day event, ivy pulls, planting work parties, and down the river cleanup following the recreation season of the summer.
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah, so again, this is a great question. I'll try and keep to 3 minutes because I can kind of get on a roll talking about what our organization does. But I, for one, even as a spectator, sometimes am very appreciative of the work that West does to address these issues, you know, particularly under the leadership of our director, Greg Geist, who's here, our assistant director, Chris Story. You know, this response is really sort of about under a preserving the capacity theme. And again, from an infrastructure perspective, our duty is to maintain and upgrade what we have to make sure that it's properly functioning. And that may sound overly simplistic and perhaps even easier than it really is, because there are a lot of assets out there for us to take care of. Miles of pipes, dozens of pump stations, thousands of stormwater inlets and ponds that all need to function to do a certain thing. And we have to work hard to make sure that they're doing that, and do that over a wide range of conditions, particularly changing climate conditions. So we really put a lot of energy and resources into making sure that our stuff works right. We're continually expanding capacity of our wastewater collection system and our treatment system. And hopefully you've heard some about the great work that we're doing, some of those great projects like our solids handling expansion at our Tri-City facility here in Oregon City, is a good example of the type of work we're doing there to preserve the capacity of our infrastructure. We're also working really hard right now on reducing infiltration and inflow, which is water that gets into our wastewater system that we don't want in our wastewater system, again, because it reduces capacity. So we're working hard with our partner cities, with our business customers, and our residential customers, and trying to control those sources. We do projects that maximize how our natural systems work for us, and you're going to hear some overlap with some of the stuff that Cheryl was saying, but it's really important, particularly when looking at water quality and the health of the Clackamas River in the face of a changing climate. But we're trying to make sure that our natural systems work for us more than against us, because they are also often more resilient than gray infrastructure to a changing climate. And a good example of that is the recent project that we did, our Carley Creek Treatment Wetland, which is a stormwater wetland that we built out in the Clackamas industrial area to manage pollution and runoff from a very intensely developed area where our wetland intercepts runoff, removes pollutants, controls flows before it discharges to the Clackamas River right above a bunch of drinking water intakes. In fact, we got a first test, and there was a picture here right after we brought that system online of a fire and a spill that discharged to that wetland, that we were able to contain all of the pollutants that would have made their way to the Clackamas River, and it didn't ruin the wetland. It was able to absorb that. So projects like that are key. We're also working to develop new design standards for growth and development projects, and this is really important for us to really try to prioritize low impact development and green infrastructure as we continue to grow our communities and develop the landscape to make sure that we are being protective as we can, and building systems that are resilient. We are supporting some science and research when it comes to climate. We partnered with the City of Gresham and the City of Portland to work with University of Washington on some precipitation modeling for future scenarios to help us build some sort of a margin of safety potentially into our design standards. And so that work is ongoing and key. And lastly, a bigger picture from an organizational perspective, we are a partner in the development of the county's climate action plan, and through which we will work to reduce our carbon footprint and reduce our energy usage, and also work to increase the resiliency of our infrastructure as we try and get a handle on climate change. So those are a few things that come to mind. There are certainly more, but that is generally the approach that we're taking to address these issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Ron. So as the items that Cheryl and Ron are discussing are all features of building resilient systems. I'll speak a little bit more as an engineer that works primarily on hard infrastructure. So the title of our session today, Can the Clackamas River Take the Heat?, is incredibly relevant to current water issues across the state of Oregon. As we continue to experience droughts and higher temperatures, it's important that those who are charged with keeping the rivers healthy and the temperatures from rising seek creative solutions, as the ones we've discussed today. In the Clackamas Basin, conservation is an essential approach to keeping cool water in the river. At WSC, we consider ourselves a one water consulting firm. We prefer to look holistically at many different options. As I mentioned earlier, our resiliency is built upon multiple concepts, multiple tools working together to provide a solid foundation. So a complementary approach to conservation in this vein would be developing alternative water supplies. And so we have some existing alternative water supplies in the Clackamas Basin. There's a couple of agencies that are leveraging aquifer storage and recovery, capturing water during the wet seasons, storing that in the ground for dry seasons. But another way that we can develop an alternative water supply is using a resource that we already have in our backyard, and so that would be recycled water. I'll pivot a little bit and discuss Clean Water Services over in the Tualatin Valley is planning a program that would supply recycled water or reuse water to farmers. Some farmers in the valley hold more junior water rights that would be at risk of getting cut off in dry or low water years. And this provides assurance that they can continue operating their business even during drought. Other farmers with more senior rights could exchange their water for recycled water, keeping cool water in the river. But making these agreements requires laying the groundwork early, building relationships with the irrigation district and end users, planning the infrastructure improvements, and proactive educational campaigns that provide understanding of the safety and benefits associated with use of Class A recycled water, which is the highest quality of recycled water authorized for use in Oregon. Another way they're keeping the Tualatin River from warming is by planting trees and restoring areas that used to be wetlands, but have been used for farmland in the past 100 years or so. So the first step in these projects is planting native wetland plants to form a natural landscape that can be irrigated with recycled water. In the future, when these areas are restored to full wetland function, they can provide extra cleaning and cooling of stormwater and irrigation water before it enters the main stem of the river to improve overall water quality. These restored natural areas are a wonderful community asset, providing wildlife habitat and recreation spaces, like the Fernhill Wetlands and Forest Grove, if any of you have ever been out there. Agencies like Clean Water Services can also supply recycled water to schools, parks, and golf courses, so that as the cost of drinking water rises, and it's rising significantly in some parts of the state, these places can be kept green for less cost. Clean Water Services has been doing this for decades, as well as many other utilities in Oregon. There are actually over 80 permitted recycled water use projects in our state. In Hermiston, the irrigation district can supply farmers with recycled water instead of paying to pump from the Columbia River. Eugene Springfield uses recycled water to grow poplar trees at the Biocycle Farm in a sustainable process that yields lumber, pulp, and paper products. The city of Sandy supplies recycled water to a local nursery to reduce their reliance on groundwater. Apple data centers in Prineville can be cooled with recycled water rather than running fresh water from the river through evaporative cooling towers. And the availability of this water at lower cost means that more industry could be attracted to the area. Organizations like OHSU, Port of Portland, and private developments such as Haslow on 8th and Broadway Corridor are treating domestic wastewater and stormwater runoff for reuse in toilet flushing, landscape irrigation, and HVAC applications, providing savings on utility bills and reducing demands on city water treatment systems. At WSC, we've worked with water and wastewater providers in the Clackamas Basin, providing engineering support, services in planning and design that assess and enhance the resiliency of the water systems. We're really proud to be a partner in the long-term vision of the basin and dedicated to being part of these conversations. So to further that goal, we'll also be leading a panel discussion with the Clackamas River water providers, hopefully at an upcoming conference, reflecting on emergency and disaster response efforts and how wildfires, ice storms, and the pandemic have changed the way we think about the future of our water.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you all. And I do have just a little bit to share from Kim Swan from Clackamas River Water Providers. And that is just to say that they are doing some fantastic work around the issue of water conservation. And again, I refer you to some of the materials on your table, and also check them out on their website. If you're not familiar with that, clackamasriverwaterproviders.org. A pretty simple one to remember. They're doing lots of great programs that you can find out more about there. Okay, so thank you again, everybody, for all the amazing stuff that you are doing out there to mitigate the impacts to the Clackamas River. Now for our final question. The last question is looking towards future solutions. So thinking outside of the box, what could or should the business community, city or county officials, and groups like yours be doing to mitigate longer-term impacts? And we'll start with you again, Cheryl.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to emphasize continue your love of the river. You know that, that as you hire new employees that may come from outside of our area, it is a great draw. The natural resources of our state are a great draw. So continue your love of the river. That also draws commitments to steward for the basin, the watershed, Clackamas River Basin. Support your local watershed. And then I'd like to emphasize some items that I have shared about our activities. Participate as willing and interested landowners in tree planting programs, in providing stream-side lands to reconnect floodplains and historic side channels, wetlands. That would be very helpful. Support green infrastructure, low-impact developments such as bioswales that can surround you. See them around parking lots, under rooftops, where there's that filtering from the native vegetation before groundwater hits our streams. And financial support is always good. It accelerates our ability to make a difference in the watershed.
And yeah, for this last question, I really appreciate this opportunity to try and inspire the audience. I'll say, you know, from a business owner or a developer, community member perspective, you matter. That's kind of my message. And I know not to sound too philosophical, but you do. You really do. Your actions matter, and a lot of people think their individual actions really don't make a difference in the bigger context. But I'm here to assure you that it does. And so as we're starting to think about, as we're trying to make sure our infrastructure works the way we want it to and is resilient in the face of a changing climate, and we're reserving as much capacity as possible, you know, we really need people's help in ensuring that our stuff works, as I've said before. So at your home or business, we ask you to think about water. Think about how you interact with it. Think about pollution and how you can help control it. That is certainly key. That not only reduces the demand on your own systems, but it reduces the demand on the public systems and helps us deal with things like certain types of pollution that are to some degree unavoidable. Our stormwater systems are really intended to remove pollution and control water, but remove pollution from sources that are mostly uncontrollable, runoff from roadways and you know, cars and leaks and tire wear and stuff like that. And it's not really intended for people to you know, contribute additional pollution that is easily preventable. And so being mindful of that, there's certainly a lot of ways to do that. You know, at your business, it's thinking about things like containing chemicals in a way, doing some spill containment, stuff like that. We had a recent example just a few weeks ago of a fire in the Oak Lodge area that was right off of Highway 99, where a large tote of used motor oil actually melted in the fire and released 300 some gallons into the storm system. Not our storm system, thankfully, but made its way into Kellogg Creek. And those types of things are totally avoidable with the right type of containment. And we can help you do that. So this is kind of our opportunity to use our slogans from our watershed health education campaigns. Toilets are not trash cans. Don't flush wipes. Dispose of your prescription drugs properly. Fix your leaks, whether they're auto leaks or pipe leaks. Follow the instructions on the chemicals that you use. We try not to tell people don't use chemicals. We know people need to use the things that they use. But there are the right ways to do that and only rain down the drain. It really does make a difference. A couple things from our perspective at West. We do provide a lot of pollution prevention assistance to property owners and businesses that we work with. So certainly, you know, be open to that and check with your municipality if it's not West about those opportunities. We promote a lot of low impact development and green infrastructure, and that's not just for new development. There are opportunities at our existing developed sites to try and do a better job managing runoff and pollution. And a great example of that is a project that we did with Clackamas drift boats out on Highway 12, where through a river health grant from West, they were able to build a rain garden in their parking lot. They identified some area that they didn't need, that they had a lot of pavement, a lot of impervious surfaces, and they approached us and we helped them build a rain garden, which was great, and those are plants in it. So that sort of thinking and working with your local community is key. And lastly, I'll throw in, and Cheryl didn't ask me to say this, but support your local watershed council, and that's the Greater Oregon City Watershed Council and CRBC in your area, and support your municipalities who are trying to work to restore natural systems. I mean, I can't emphasize enough how important that's going to be for us going forward, is restoring streams, wetlands, riparian areas, those things that are going to help us deal with climate change and protecting water quality. So that was a little long, but that was one of my favorite questions, so thank you for your time.
Thanks, Ron. Yeah, I'll reiterate, support your local watersheds, support your utilities, be engaged, understand what's going on, the challenges that they're facing, and how you can show up and contribute to creating this better water future for all of us. I mentioned earlier that climate change, water scarcity, and increased frequency of natural disaster will require us to collaborate like never before. Central to that theme is shifting to a one water mindset. One water is the concept that all water has value, that all of us working in water, whether it is surface water management, stormwater control, drinking water providers, and wastewater collection and treatment, we need to work together in advancing solutions that secure resilient water supplies for the future. We'll have to stop thinking of water in these different categories and begin to recognize it for what it is, water, a very precious resource that cannot be wasted and cannot be taken for granted. That is what I mean when I say one water. Thankfully, we have the technology, the innovation, the scientific research to support treatment of any water resource for any use. Our water cycle does not need to be a simple loop. It can have many connections that help us use water where it is most needed and help us conserve water when it is most needed. So I want to acknowledge the important efforts made by agencies in the Klamath Basin to date in forging important partnerships and working together to protect the region's water supply through source water protection, conservation programs, emergency response collaboration, and so many other ways. I commend you all for showing up here today to have this important discussion about one of our most important natural resources, to think about what we can do in the near future to secure safe, reliable water supply for future generations. Many of the examples I've shared today include water reuse or recycled water. It is not a silver bullet. There's no silver bullet. It's one of many tools in the tool chest: ecosystem services, surface water management, many of the things we've talked about today. They all need to work in concert to preserve the Clackamas River as an important natural resource. But there's a growing interest and need for recycled water across Oregon, whether in the wetter Willamette Valley, as well as in the arid and central and eastern regions. We have many talented and motivated folks working to create programs that ensure the safety of recycled water for many different kinds of uses. But what is especially exciting is the new ways we will come together in partnership to innovate and find new creative ways to preserve our water supply while providing security to farmers and local businesses, enhancing the natural environment, and keeping Oregon green. Thank you so much for your time today. I hope that I've inspired you to think a little differently about water and what's possible when we all work together.
Okay, thank you all. That was awesome. Now it's time for questions, and we have some amazing questions here we're going to start tackling, and I'm going to let you guys just decide who's going to answer this. We had a couple of questions related to water quality. One is someone heard that the Russman landfill is contaminating the Clackamas. Is this true? If so, what's being done about it? And then also, what progress are we making to reduce the use of commercially applied pesticides and fertilizers that contaminate the river? Any takers on that one?
The very first part of that question, I don't have a response to. Anyone? And that's probably why I'm holding the mic. And then the rest of that, pesticide reductions.
Right.
The Clackamas River Basin Council, in conjunction with our Clackamas River water providers, has a program called Parting with Pesticides. The program is voluntary. We provide information about being pesticide-free or pesticide-wise with yard signs that reflect a property owner's choice. So pesticide-free, just what it sounds like. Pesticide-wise, how might that property owner or business owner be reducing pesticide use in the area? The Clackamas River Basin Council also has workshops that we've provided to show ways in which to reduce pesticide, what our alternatives are, and we have fact sheets that are both in English and in second language Spanish. And then pictorial ones that can help individuals, such as what are the correct times to apply legal pesticide chemicals to properties and encourage appropriate and responsible use. Was there a third part of that question?
Just other chemicals besides pesticides, but like fertilizers. I think you addressed it.
Okay. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay.
All right. Thank you, Cheryl. We have a couple of questions related to dams. So it sounds like the need for water storage is growing at the same time pressures for dam removal is increasing. How do you reconcile those interests? And then specifically a question about breaching the dams on the Upper Columbia and wondering if we've been approached about breaching the dams on the Clackamas.
I'm going to talk about the dams on the Clackamas. In 2010, the PGE hydroelectric project was relicensed. And with that relicensure, they were required to make several improvements in their area. And the focus was a goal of survivability that they need to reach, 98% survival of migrating fish, which they have reached through the improvements they have made. In our state, the Clackamas populations of Chinook and Coho are showing increased counts. No other area in our state are showing that. Now for steelhead, all populations seem to be just flat, not increasing. But we're very pleased that these results are shown in our watershed. The Columbia I can't speak to. I'll speak a little bit more about the Clackamas dams because the improvements that they've made for migrating fish, our endangered fish species get beyond the dams that begin just above Estacada. They go into U.S. Forest Service lands, which are pretty clean, pristine waterways. So that has been a benefit to these species that are showing increased counts in their migration numbers. And the activities that we're performing to increase habitat then take advantage of those increased numbers, providing refugia for migrating fish at all life cycles.
And Cheryl, another question just to kind of tag on to that. Do you support hatcheries to help build fish populations in the Clackamas?
I leave that question to fish biologists. I don't have a comment. Anyone? Anyone in the audience?
Okay, thank you. We have a couple of questions related to reuse of water. So one, for recycled water, would a new system of piping be needed, or how would it be distributed? And then also a question about filtering water to drinking quality to extend the use of existing water. So I'm not sure exactly what that's getting at as opposed to the normal treatment process, but maybe you do, Susan.
Sure, yeah, I'll speak to that a little bit. And I think in a way, those questions are related because, so the recycled water that we use in Oregon is for non-potable purposes. It is the quality of our existing program does not provide a framework for potable or drinking water reuse. That does exist in other states. It doesn't exist here yet, I will say. So for a non-potable system, there would be an alternate delivery or distribution means from a drinking water source. But to speak to the second question, it is absolutely possible. We have, there are states like California, Texas, that have developed frameworks to ensure safety of reuse of water for drinking water, purposes. There's implementation of programs that are ongoing and existing, and they're able to use the existing drinking water distribution system. I think I answered both of those questions.
I think you did great, thank you.
Okay.
All right, so let me find a question for Ron here. Are you ready? How will WES and Oregon City's inflow and infiltration reduction preserve water that is available on any given day? And how will it preserve the watershed?
Yeah, so I did mention a little bit about our inflow and infiltration reduction. I don't actually work on that project, and so, but I could still answer the question in a broad sense that when we say it reserves capacity, where we have rainwater or groundwater infiltrating our wastewater system, that water goes along with all of the other water to our treatment plants and exhausts our capacity, particularly for managing wet weather flows. And so at our treatment plants, it's a little different in how we manage how we manage to treat wastewater in the summer than it is in the winter. And the winter, a lot of times, is some of our most challenging time to meet certain limits that we have in our permits. And so rather than making a significant expansion of our treatment capacity at our treatment plants to treat basically what is a lot of rainwater and groundwater at certain times of the year, we are going to invest and work with our partner cities and our customers to keep that water out of the system in the first place. And so it's really that type of water that gets into the system that we can just make capacity by keeping it out. There are significant cost savings, as our capital program manager, Lynn Chicoine, has presented to the community over the past couple of years in taking this approach.
Okay, thanks, Ron. The next question I'm going to ask someone from the audience to potentially answer. I understand that Todd Heigerken is here today. So this, I think, has to do with Clackamas River water providers, but I'll let you decide. As water becomes limited, what is prioritized for use? Is water supply for drinking a priority? And how do water rights play into prioritization of users? You want to tackle that?
Boy, the whole conversation of water rights could go on and on and on. But you're right. There is obviously priorities when you had a drought circumstance, and so obviously the usage for human consumption is a priority as we go forth. But we also work in Oregon under the doctrine of prior appropriation. So really, it's when those water rights were first established is a big deal as far as determining who has access to that water initially. And so there's a number of other competing uses, not only for municipal use, but you have agricultural use further upstream. And then you have also in-stream water use, or in-stream water rights as well, that protects some of the water in the waterways. And so one of the things we do find, and you'll hear it from some of the municipalities, is they have to maintain or be aware of certain fish flows in the river. And one of the slides that you saw was some of the work that Clackamas River water providers have been doing in order to try to make that connection between fish flows and people's use of water, especially for irrigation. And the Fish on the Run irrigation done is an example of just trying to create that awareness that we all have an impact on the river. But obviously, one of the things that we are looking forward to, or looking forward in doing, is also our continued work on development of water management and conservation plans. And within those plans are curtailment plans that kind of help prioritize where we want to make sure that we're putting the water to where it's needed.
Thank you, Todd. I appreciate your willingness to step up on short notice for that. Wonderful having you in the audience. Okay, our final question. Will you help us in restoring the River Resource Museum and area? hosting public messages, media, etc., volunteer work days. The museum will be a public model of green business. Anybody have a response to that?
Well, I don't have a good response to that because I'm not really sure what it is. And so I will say we certainly invest in community projects, not-for-profits, watershed councils, group like Mr. Herman's work. And so, presented the opportunity to really help the community, help us meet our needs, we would certainly be interested if in our service area. So we love doing projects like that.
Yeah, I would add we engage in a lot of strategic communications, public outreach, and educational campaign work. So this type of creating a space to educate and engage the public on important water resources is right in our wheelhouse and something that we do all of the time.
I like those echoing educational efforts. And I think the question is posed for everyone in this room as well as us as your panel members.
You're probably right. Thank you all. Okay, well, we're past time. It's actually 1 o'clock. I know some of you might need to scoot out. But I just want to say that, I ask you to help me in thanking this amazing panel for sharing their wisdom with us today. So let's do that first. Thank you. And also thank you again to the Oregon City Business Alliance and to all of you for joining us today in this conversation. So I guess that's it. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you, Renee, for doing such an amazing job as moderator and introducing this very talented and educated, informative group of panelists. On behalf of the Oregon City Business Alliance, we do appreciate everything you do. I think from listening to their presentation today, we all recognize no one agency or no one entity can take on this challenge alone. This is a fully integrated process where the right hand and the left hand have to continually have a dialogue and be engaged with one another if we're going to accomplish mutual objectives that provides for the much needed water that we're going to have a demand for as our population grows, as our businesses thrive. Those demands are just going to increase. So the more we can do to try to conserve, protect, enhance, the better off we'll all be in the long run. So again, thank you, Wes, for sponsoring today's presentation. Great job. We will be posting this to our website and to our YouTube channel. So if you know someone that you feel would benefit from being able to watch today's program, you might let them know that that will be available shortly. I'd like to also thank the Abernathy crowd, the Abernathy staff, for another amazing luncheon. I tell you, they keep providing better and better encore presentations. I can hardly wait for November with what that might be. So we anxiously look forward to that. Next month, we're going to be having representatives from ODOT here. Obviously, we all know how congestion is an issue on all our freeways. The biggest topic right now is tolling actually going to occur at the I-205 George Abernathy Bridge, or is it not? Right now, ODOT, Metro, a lot of other state agencies are moving forward with implementing the tolling process within the next few years. We're here to say, well, is there another alternative? As you all know, Congress is still voting on an infrastructure bill that's going in front of the elected representatives possibly this week, but definitely soon. And within that infrastructure bill, there may be a tremendous amount of funding since the I-205 widening and the seismic improvements to the George Abernathy Bridge was the only shovel-ready project that the state of Oregon was able to submit for that infrastructure bill. So keep your fingers crossed if that comes through, because I don't know about you, but I go across that bridge a lot. And I'm really not looking forward to getting a bill in the mail every month saying, cross, 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 you went across it 25 times. Not fun. But anyway, that'll be next month. It's always on the fourth Tuesday of every month, so put that on your calendar. We won't be meeting again in December because it's so close to Christmas. So that'll be the last gathering that we have for this year. But we invite you all to come again in November. Invite your business associates, invite your friends. We've got plenty of room. Hopefully the mask mandate will be taken away soon and we can all get our lives back to normal again. So again, enjoy the rest of the week. I think it's not raining right now. We'll look forward to seeing you next month. Thanks for coming.